My daughter asked if Daddy's friend from next door was going to be her new mommy since she already sleeps in Mommy's bed when I work nights. I was braiding Chloe's hair for picture day when she asked the question that changed everything. Mommy, when you and Daddy get divorced, do I have to call Mrs. Dunlap Mom, or can I still call her Joanna? I laughed and kept braiding. Sweet pea, Daddy and I aren't getting divorced. Where did you get that idea? But Joanna said she's moving in after you move out. She already picked which room will be mine at her house. I put down the brush. Chloe, when did Mrs. Dunlap say this? Yesterday when she was here. She measured my room with that tape thing. Said she needs to know what furniture to buy for when I stay with her and Daddy. Daddy said not to tell you because it's a surprise. Honey, I think you misunderstood. Joanna was probably just being silly. No, Mommy, she was serious. She already sleeps here when you work nights, in your bed. She leaves before you get home, but sometimes I see her. The hospital had me working 3 night shifts a week. Richard stayed home with Chloe those nights. When does Joanna come over? Right after you leave for work. Daddy tells me to go to bed early on your work nights, but I can hear them talking. Sometimes Joanna reads me stories if I can't sleep. She says she's practicing for when I'm her real daughter. I felt my chest tighten. What kind of stories? The ones she writes. About a princess whose mommy has to go away so a better mommy can take care of her. She says they're just pretend, but the princess looks like me in the pictures she draws. My hand stilled in Chloe's hair. Does Daddy know about these stories? He helped write them. He told Joanna what my favorite things are so the princess would be just like me. They have a whole notebook. I finished the braid mechanically. Chloe, I need you to tell me everything about when Joanna visits. She counted on her fingers. She comes over Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights. Those were my shift nights. She brings dinner sometimes. Last week she brought her overnight bag. She keeps clothes in Mommy's closet now. The left side where you keep your dresses. What? She moved your dresses to the guest room closet. Said she needs space for her work clothes since she'll be here more. Daddy helped her carry them. I dropped Chloe at school and went straight home. Richard was in the kitchen on his laptop. He looked up and smiled. Hey, thought you were doing groceries after drop-off. I went to our bedroom closet. The left side was full of clothes I didn't recognize. Blouses with tags still on them. Dresses in Joanna's size. Richard stood in the doorway. I can explain. Chloe says Joanna's been telling her she's going to be her new mom. Kids misunderstand things. You know how Chloe is. She has an active imagination. I pulled out one of Joanna's dresses. This isn't imagination. This is her clothes in my closet. She needed somewhere to store some things. Her apartment is being renovated. For how long? A few weeks. Maybe a month. I walked to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was in the holder. Her makeup bag on the counter. Face cream, shampoo, all arranged like she lived here. I came back out. She's not storing things. She's moving in. You're being dramatic. She stays over sometimes when you work. It's convenient. 3 nights a week isn't sometimes. It's half the week. You work those nights anyway. What difference does it make who sleeps here? I went to Chloe's room, found the notebook in her desk, pages of stories in Joanna's handwriting. Princess Chloe's mother gets a job in another kingdom. Has to leave forever. The beautiful neighbor becomes the new queen. They live happily ever after. At the bottom of one page, in Richard's writing, perfect. Chloe will love this when we tell her. I brought the notebook downstairs. When exactly were you planning to tell our daughter I was leaving? Richard looked at the notebook. Those are just stories. Joanna likes creative writing. Stories about me disappearing and her replacing me. With notes from you about timing. Lisa, you're never here. You work constantly. Even when you're home, you're exhausted. Chloe barely sees you. She needs stability. A mother figure who's present. Joanna's here. She's been more of a mother these past months than you have. I work night shifts to pay for this house. Our life. While you build your consulting business from home. That's the arrangement we made. Arrangements change. Joanna understands what Chloe needs. What I need. She doesn't have to work. Her divorce settlement was generous. She can be here full time. So you're planning to replace me with someone who doesn't need to work. Who can play house while I pay the bills. No one's replacing you. You're choosing to be absent. I'm choosing to find someone who can be present. I looked at him. My husband of 9 years. Planning my erasure while I work to support us. I'm going to make you regret doing this to me. I picked up my phone and called the hospital. My supervisor answered on the second ring. I need to take a sick day. My voice stayed steady even though my hands were shaking. She asked if I was okay and I said yes, just a personal emergency. She told me to take care of myself and not to worry about coverage. I hung up and looked at Richard still standing in the kitchen doorway. I'm going to document everything before you make it disappear. He started to speak, but I walked past him to the bedroom. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every blouse hanging in my closet with the tag still attached. Every dress in Joanna's size taking up space where my clothes used to be. I opened each item and photographed the price tags, the brand labels, the size markers. I moved to the bathroom and photographed her toothbrush in the holder next to mine. Her makeup bag sitting on the counter like she lived here. Her face cream, her shampoo, her hair products all lined up on my shelf. I went to Chloe's room and found the measuring tape on her dresser, photographed it with the timestamp visible. Went back and took more pictures of the notebook, every page of those stories about the princess whose mother disappears. I photographed Richard's handwriting at the bottom of the pages. Perfect. Chloe will love this when we tell her. I backed up every photo to 3 different cloud accounts. Richard followed me around the house asking what I was doing. I ignored him and kept taking pictures. Evidence of a woman moving into my house while I worked to pay for it. Proof that my husband was planning to erase me from my daughter's life. When I finished, I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled up my work email on my phone. I typed a message to Nora asking if she could meet with me privately after her shift ended. Personal emergency that might affect my schedule. She responded within 5 minutes saying she'd meet me in the staff break room at 7. I looked at the clock. 4 hours. I spent those hours sitting at the kitchen table going through my phone, organizing the photos into folders. Richard stayed in his office. I could hear him on the phone but couldn't make out the words. Probably calling Joanna to warn her. At 6:30, I drove to the hospital. Nora was already in the break room when I got there. She closed the door and sat down across from me. I showed her everything. The photos of Joanna's belongings in my house. The notebook with the stories about making me disappear. Richard's notes about timing. Nora listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I've been a nurse for 30 years. I've seen men try this before. They paint the working mother as absent while they play house with someone new. She pulled out her tablet and started typing. I'm documenting your work performance right now. Your attendance records. The fact that you've never shown any signs of the neglectful parenting he described. You're one of our best nurses. You show up on time, you're professional, you care about your patients. If he tries to claim you're unstable or neglecting your job, we'll have documentation that proves otherwise. She saved the file and sent it to her personal email. This is off the record, but on the record if you need it. I thanked her and she hugged me before I left. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and pulled up my phone. Searched for divorce attorneys in my area. Found 3 that specialized in custody cases. The third one was Grace Schaefer. Her website showed case results where she'd won custody for parents whose ex-partners tried to erase them. Parental alienation cases. I read through her bio. 20 years of family law experience. Former child psychologist before law school. I called her office. The receptionist said they were closed, but I could leave a message. I started explaining and she interrupted me. Hold on. Let me see if Grace is still here. Music played for 30 seconds. Then a woman's voice came on the line. This is Grace Schaefer. My receptionist said you have an emergency custody situation. I told her everything. The notebooks. Joanna's belongings in my house. Richard's plan to replace me. The stories they wrote together preparing my daughter for my disappearance. Grace listened and I could hear her typing. Can you come to my office right now? I'll wait. I drove straight there. Her office was downtown in a building with other law firms. She met me in the lobby and took me back to her office. Sat me down and pulled out a recorder. I'm going to record everything you tell me. Then I need to see all the evidence on your phone. She recorded my entire story. 40 minutes of me explaining how I discovered my husband was planning to erase me from my daughter's life. When I finished, she had me email her all the photos. She pulled them up on her computer and went through each one. This shows premeditation. He's been planning this for months. That's going to work against him in custody proceedings. Grace made notes on a legal pad while she talked. The notebook stories are particularly damaging. He's literally preparing your daughter to accept your disappearance. That's textbook parental alienation. She looked up at me. My brother is a private investigator. I want to bring him in immediately to document Joanna's presence at your house during your work shifts. We need surveillance footage of her coming and going. Proof that this isn't just storage like your husband claims. She picked up her phone and called someone. Kieran, I need you at my office now. Emergency custody case. She hung up and looked at me. He'll be here in 20 minutes. She spent that time explaining the custody evaluation process. How we'd file for emergency evaluation based on parental alienation. How the court would appoint someone to assess the situation. How Richard's documented plan would work against him. Kieran arrived and Grace introduced us. He looked like his sister with the same dark hair and sharp eyes. She showed him the photos and explained the situation. He nodded and pulled out his own tablet. I can set up surveillance tonight. Cameras positioned to capture everyone who enters and exits your property. We'll document her pattern of visits. How often she comes. How long she stays. Whether she has a key. I gave him my address and my work schedule. He said he'd have cameras in place before my next shift. Grace walked me out and told me not to go home yet. Give Kieran time to set up without your husband noticing. I sat in a coffee shop for 2 hours before driving home. Richard was in the living room when I got back. He looked up from his laptop. Where were you? I told him I went for a drive to clear my head. He said we needed to talk about this situation. I told him I was tired and going to bed. Chloe was already asleep. I checked on her and then went to our bedroom. Got ready for bed like it was a normal night. Richard came in an hour later and got into bed beside me. We lay there in the dark, not speaking. I thought about Kieran's cameras outside capturing everything. Thought about Grace's plan to file for emergency custody evaluation. Thought about the notebook stories and Joanna's clothes in my closet. Richard's breathing eventually evened out into sleep. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. The next night was one of my scheduled shifts. I got ready for work like always. Made dinner for Chloe. Helped her with her homework. Kissed her goodbye and told Richard I'd see him in the morning. Drove to the hospital and changed into my scrubs. Kieran texted me 30 minutes into my shift. She just arrived. Overnight bag. Let herself in with a key. I put my phone away and focused on my patients. Tried not to think about Joanna in my house. In my bed. Reading stories to my daughter about how I was going away forever. The week passed and Kieran sent me updates after each shift. Joanna arrived like clockwork 30 minutes after I left. Stayed until an hour before I was due home. Let herself in with her own key each time. He sent me screenshots from the surveillance footage. Joanna walking up my driveway with bags. Joanna carrying boxes into my house. Joanna moving more of her belongings in while I worked to pay the mortgage. Grace called me on Friday. We have everything we need. Clear pattern of systematic infiltration. I'm filing for emergency custody evaluation on Monday. She explained that the filing would include the notebook stories, the photos of Joanna's belongings, and Kieran's surveillance footage. The court would see documented proof that Richard planned to remove me from Chloe's life and replace me with his affair partner. I asked how long the process would take. She said emergency evaluations usually got scheduled within 2 weeks. The evaluator would interview both of us, interview Chloe, review all the evidence, then make a recommendation to the court about custody arrangements. I thanked her and hung up. Went through the motions of my shift, checked vitals, administered medications, comforted patients, all while knowing that on Monday everything would change. Grace filed the paperwork first thing Monday morning. Emergency custody evaluation based on parental alienation and documented plan to remove mother from child's life. She called me at lunch to confirm it was done. Now we wait for Richard to get served. That happened Tuesday afternoon. I was at work when my phone rang. Richard screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What did you do? You filed for divorce? For custody evaluation? You're overreacting to a simple friendship. I stayed calm. My attorney will handle all communication from now on. He kept screaming about how I was ruining everything, how Joanna was just helping out, how I was being dramatic and making something out of nothing. I told him to have his attorney contact Grace and then I hung up. He called back immediately. I sent it to voicemail, called Grace and told her Richard was trying to contact me. She said she'd handle it. Let him leave voicemails. Let him send texts. Everything he says just builds our case. I went back to work, focused on my patients, checked my phone during breaks and saw 15 missed calls from Richard, 12 voicemails, 20 texts, all of them getting more frantic, all of them showing exactly the kind of behavior Grace said would work against him. I forwarded everything to Grace and put my phone on silent, finished my shift and drove home. Joanna was waiting in my driveway when I pulled in. She stood next to her car with her arms crossed. I grabbed my phone and opened the voice recorder app before I got out, started recording and slipped it into my scrub pocket with the microphone facing out. You need to stop this nonsense. She walked toward me. Richard told me you filed for divorce, that you're trying to take Chloe away from him. I kept my distance. You've been staying in my house while I work, sleeping in my bed, writing stories to my daughter about me leaving. Those are just stories. Creative writing. You're making this into something it's not. You told Chloe she'd be your daughter, that you picked out which room would be hers. Chloe misunderstood. Kids do that. She twisted innocent conversations into something dramatic. I held my ground. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? She stopped. That's none of your business. It became my business when you started planning to replace me as Chloe's mother. No one's replacing you. You're barely here anyway, working all those night shifts. Chloe needs someone present. Someone who can actually be a mother to her. I work to pay for the house you've been moving into. Richard and I have been together for 6 months. She said it like she was proud. He's unhappy. He needs someone who understands him, who can be there for him and Chloe when you're always at the hospital. So you decided to infiltrate my home, move your belongings in, write stories preparing my daughter for my departure. I'm not infiltrating anything. Richard invited me. He wants me there. Chloe likes me. She talks to me about things she can't talk to you about because you're never around. I pulled out my phone, showed her I'd been recording. Every word she just said was captured. Her face went white. You can't record me without permission. Actually, I can. Single-party consent state. I only need my own permission to record conversations I'm part of. You tricked me. I documented you admitting to a 6-month affair and your plan to take over my role as Chloe's mother. That's not a trick. That's evidence. She stepped toward me. Delete that right now. I backed toward my front door. Stay away from me and my family. Your family? Richard wants to be with me. Chloe needs a real mother, not someone who works all the time and comes home too tired to care. I went inside and locked the door. Sent the recording to Grace immediately with a message about Joanna confronting me in my driveway. Grace called within 5 minutes. That recording is perfect. She's admitting everything. I'm filing for a restraining order today. This shows harassment and her documented intention to replace you as Chloe's mother. How fast can you get it? Emergency orders can be granted same day if the judge sees immediate danger. Her confronting you at your home after you filed for divorce shows escalating behavior. The recording proves her obsession with taking your place. Grace filed the paperwork that afternoon. Included the recording, photos of Joanna's belongings in my house, and the notebook stories. The judge reviewed everything and granted a temporary restraining order by 5 that evening. Joanna couldn't come within 100 yards of me, Chloe, or our home. Richard called me screaming when he got the notification. You got a restraining order against Joanna? She was just trying to talk to you. She admitted on tape to a 6-month affair. To planning to replace me as Chloe's mother. That's not just talking. This is insane. You're destroying everything over a misunderstanding. Have your attorney contact Grace. I hung up. 2 days later, I was at work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Turner? This is Officer Taylor with the police department. We're at your residence responding to a restraining order violation. My heart jumped. What happened? Your neighbor called to report that a woman matching the description of Joanna Dunlap entered your home approximately 30 minutes ago. We arrived and found Miss Dunlap in your bedroom going through your personal belongings. Your husband let her in despite being served with the restraining order yesterday. Is Chloe there? No, ma'am. Your husband said she's at the school. We're placing Miss Dunlap under arrest for violating the protective order. I thanked him and called Grace. She said the violation would strengthen our custody case. Richard knowingly brought Joanna into the home in direct violation of a court order. That showed disregard for legal boundaries and Chloe's safety. The custody evaluator called me 3 days later. Her name was Brooke Pate. She wanted to schedule interviews with me, Richard, and Chloe. I got the first appointment. I arrived at her office with a folder full of evidence. The notebooks, screenshots from Kieran's surveillance footage, photos of Joanna's belongings in my home, transcripts of Chloe's innocent revelations about the stories. Brooke reviewed everything carefully. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to visible concern as she read through the notebooks, the stories about the princess whose mother had to leave forever. Richard's notes in the margins about timing and how Chloe would react. This is very troubling. She looked up at me. These stories appear designed to normalize maternal abandonment to your daughter. That's exactly what they were doing. Preparing her to accept me leaving so Joanna could take my place. And your husband participated in creating these stories? His handwriting is in the margins. He told Joanna details about Chloe's favorite things, so the princess would be just like her. Brooke made notes. How has Chloe responded to all of this? She's confused. She thought Joanna was going to be her new mother because that's what they told her. She didn't understand why I'd be leaving, but they kept saying it would be better. Has your daughter expressed distress about the situation? She asked me if I was really staying. If the stories were true. She's 7 years old and 2 adults spent months preparing her for her mother to disappear. Brooke scheduled Chloe's interview for the next day. I sat in the room with my daughter as Brooke asked gentle questions about Joanna and the stories. Chloe talked about the notebook. About how Joanna wrote stories where the princess's mommy got a job far away and couldn't come back. How the beautiful neighbor became the new queen and everyone was happy. Did you want a new mommy? Brooke asked. Chloe shook her head. No. But Daddy and Joanna said it would be better. That mommy was too tired to take care of me, right? That Joanna could do better because she didn't have to work. I felt my chest tighten watching my daughter explain how 2 adults manipulated her reality. Did the stories make you scared? Sometimes. Chloe picked at her sleeve. I didn't want Mommy to leave, but they kept reading them and saying it was okay, that I'd understand when I was older. Brooke made extensive notes, asked Chloe about her daily routine, her relationship with me, her feelings about the changes at home. Grace called me after Richard's interview. It didn't go well for him. He spent most of the session complaining about your work schedule, praising Joanna's availability, never once acknowledging that your income pays the mortgage on the house he wanted to give to his affair partner. Did he mention the notebooks? He tried to claim they were just creative writing exercises, that you're overreacting. Brooke apparently asked him directly if he understood that preparing a child to accept maternal abandonment was a form of psychological manipulation. He didn't have a good answer. Kieran called me at work a week later. You need to hear this. I found something about Joanna. What? A woman named Tina reached out. She's Joanna's ex-husband's sister. She saw Joanna's name in connection with your case and wanted to warn you. Warn me about what? Joanna's done this before. She targeted Tina's brother when he was married, befriended his wife, gradually replaced her in the family. The pattern is identical to what she's doing to you. I met Tina at a coffee shop the next morning. She brought documents, photos, a timeline of how Joanna infiltrated her brother's marriage. She started as a friend. Tina spread papers across the table. Helpful neighbor. Then she was at their house constantly, offering to watch the kids, cooking dinner. My sister-in-law thought she was being kind. When did it change? When Joanna started telling the kids their mother wasn't doing enough, that she could do better. She wrote stories for them too, about how sometimes parents need to be replaced with better ones. My stomach turned. What happened? My brother left his wife for Joanna. Got full custody because Joanna had spent a year documenting every time his ex-wife worked late or seemed tired. Made her look neglectful. Then Joanna lost interest once she had what she wanted. Moved on to someone else within 6 months. I took photos of everything Tina brought, sent them to Grace. Grace called back within an hour. This establishes a pattern. Joanna's a serial homewrecker who specifically targets families. This will destroy Richard's case if he's still planning to claim she'd be a good influence on Chloe. Grace subpoenaed Richard's financial records. Found an account I didn't know existed. He'd been transferring money from his consulting income into this hidden account for 8 months. The transfers started right around when the affair began. He's been planning this for a long time. Grace showed me the bank statements. Systematically hiding money while you paid the bills. Building a nest egg for his new life with Joanna. Richard's business partner Casey called me on a Thursday afternoon. I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet? We met at a restaurant near his office. Casey looked uncomfortable. I didn't know what Richard was planning until recently. He pulled out his phone. But I found emails that I think you need to see. He showed me messages between Richard and Joanna. Discussions about transitioning me out. About timing the divorce to minimize financial impact on Richard. About how to document my absence to build a custody case. He talked about you like you were an employee he was replacing. Casey looked disgusted. Not his wife, not Chloe's mother, just someone in the way of what he wanted. I forwarded the emails to Grace. She added them to our evidence file. The temporary custody hearing happened 3 weeks after I filed. I sat in the courtroom watching Richard's attorney try to explain the notebooks, the hidden money, the systematic infiltration of our home by his affair partner. The attorney kept using phrases like misunderstanding and creative expression. The judge cut him off. I've reviewed the evidence. These notebooks show 2 adults preparing a child to accept her mother's removal from her life. The financial records show the father hiding assets while the mother worked to support the family. The surveillance footage shows the father's paramour moving into the marital home during the mother's work shifts. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is calculated. The judge awarded me temporary primary custody. Richard got supervised visitation only, every other weekend, 2 hours at a time, with a court-appointed supervisor present. Richard looked shocked. His attorney tried to argue. The judge shut it down. The father violated a restraining order to allow his affair partner access to the family home. He participated in creating materials designed to psychologically prepare the child for maternal abandonment. He hid financial resources while his wife worked to support the household. These actions demonstrate poor judgment and concerning disregard for the child's emotional well-being. Supervised visitation will continue until the full evaluation is complete and the father demonstrates understanding of appropriate parental behavior. I left the courthouse with Grace. Chloe was safe. Richard couldn't take her. Joanna couldn't get near us. The house was mine. Everything Richard planned had fallen apart. My phone rang at 6 that evening. Richard's mother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Lisa, it's Margaret. I need to talk to you about what happened today. Her voice sounded tired. Richard told me about the hearing. I had no idea what he was planning. None of us did. I sat down on the couch. He never mentioned any of this to you? Nothing. He said you two were having problems, but he made it sound like normal marriage stuff. Work stress. Different schedules. I never imagined he was planning to replace you with that woman next door. Margaret's voice got harder. I found out about the notebooks today. Richard's sister came over after the hearing and told me everything. The stories about Chloe's mother leaving. The way they prepared my granddaughter to accept your disappearance. I'm disgusted. She paused. I want you to know I'm on your side in this. Richard is my son, but what he did is wrong. Unforgivable. I want to keep seeing Chloe regardless of what happens between you and Richard. She's my granddaughter and I love her. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thank you, Margaret. That means a lot. We made plans for her to take Chloe to the park that weekend. When I hung up, Richard's sister texted me. Similar apology. Similar disgust at what her brother had done. His own family was turning against him. 2 days later, the school called. This is Principal Davis. We have a situation. Joanna Dunlap just tried to pick up Chloe from the school. She claims she's the emergency contact. My heart stopped. Where is she now? We didn't release Chloe to her. Miss Dunlap became aggressive when we refused, so we called the police. They're here now. I grabbed my keys and drove to the school. Police cars in the parking lot. Joanna in handcuffs near one of them. She saw me and started yelling, "You can't keep me away from her. Chloe needs me. You're never there for her." The officer guided her into the car. Principal Davis met me at the entrance. "Chloe's fine. She's in my office with the counselor. We were prepared for this because of the custody situation you informed us about. The restraining order is posted in our system. The moment Monsieur Dunlap showed up, we knew she wasn't allowed here." I found Chloe sitting on a small couch in the principal's office. The counselor sat nearby. Chloe looked scared. "Mommy, why was Joanna here? Why was she yelling?" I knelt down and hugged her. "Joanna made some bad choices, honey. The police are handling it. You're safe." The officer who arrested Joanna came in to get my statement. Second violation in a month. The judge won't be happy about this. I drove Chloe home and called Grace immediately. She arrested again, at the school. Grace swore softly. "That's perfect for us. Terrible for her, but perfect for our case. I'm filing a motion tomorrow." Grace's motion arrived at the courthouse the next morning. I got a copy by email. She laid out every violation, every attempt Joanna made to insert herself into Chloe's life, every piece of evidence showing obsessive behavior. The motion argued that Richard's plan to make this woman Chloe's primary caregiver showed dangerous judgment, that any man who would choose someone this unstable to raise his daughter shouldn't have unsupervised access. The hearing happened fast. Emergency motion. The judge who'd granted the temporary custody order presided. Grace presented the evidence. The restraining order violations, the arrest reports, Joanna's attempt to take Chloe from the school. Richard's attorney tried to argue that Joanna's behavior wasn't Richard's fault, that he couldn't control what she did. The judge cut him off. "Your client planned to move this woman into his home as his daughter's primary caregiver. He spent months preparing his daughter to accept this woman as her mother. Her behavior demonstrates exactly why the mother's concerns about this arrangement were valid." The judge looked at Richard. "As a condition of maintaining even supervised visitation, you will have zero contact with Joanna Dunlap. No calls, no texts, no meetings. If I find out you've violated this order, your visitation will be terminated entirely. Do you understand?" Richard nodded. He looked smaller somehow. Defeated. Grace smiled as we left the courthouse. That went better than expected. Brooke called me the following week. "The custody evaluation is complete. I'd like you to come by my office to review it before I submit it to the court." Grace came with me. We sat in Brooke's office while she walked us through her findings. The report was 30 pages long. Detailed interviews with me, Richard, Chloe, home visits, psychological assessments. Brooke's conclusion took up the last 5 pages. Mr. Richard's plan to systematically replace the child's mother with his affair partner shows concerning disregard for the child's attachment to her mother and disturbing willingness to manipulate the child's reality through fictional stories normalizing maternal abandonment. The father's behavior suggests he views parenting as a role that can be filled by any available woman, rather than understanding the specific and irreplaceable bond between this child and her mother. Brooke looked at me. "I'm recommending primary physical custody to you with supervised visitation for the father. The evidence is overwhelming that he prioritized his relationship with his affair partner over his daughter's emotional well-being." Grace squeezed my hand. This is exactly what we needed. Richard's attorney called Grace 2 days later requesting a meeting. Settlement negotiation. We met at Grace's office. Richard's attorney looked tired. "My client is willing to agree to primary custody for Lisa if she'll accept unsupervised visitation and joint decision-making on major issues. Education, medical care, religious upbringing." Grace looked at me. We stepped into the hallway. "This is a good offer. You'd get what you want without going through a full trial." But I thought about the notebooks. The stories preparing Chloe to accept my disappearance. Richard's face when he told me I was choosing to be absent. No, I want the judge to hear everything. Richard needs to face full consequences for trying to erase me from my daughter's life. Grace nodded. "Then we go to trial." We went back into the conference room. "My client declines your offer. We'll see you at the final hearing." Richard's attorney packed up his briefcase without another word. The final hearing was scheduled for exactly 2 months after I first filed. The courthouse felt different this time. More permanent, more serious. I wore my best suit. Grace had prepared me for days. We'd practiced my testimony until I could recite it without crying. The judge entered and everyone stood. The same judge who'd handled the temporary custody hearing. She'd read everything, the notebooks, the financial records, Brooke's evaluation. Grace called me to the stand first. She walked me through discovering the plan, finding Joanna's clothes in my closet, her toiletries in my bathroom, the notebook in Chloe's room. Tell the court about the stories. I described them in detail. Princess Chloe's mother getting a job in another kingdom, having to leave forever, The beautiful neighbor becoming the new queen. Richard's handwriting at the bottom of one page saying, "Perfect. Chloe will love this when we tell her." And what was your reaction when you found these stories? I felt like my husband had been preparing our daughter to accept my death while I was still alive, like he was erasing me while I worked to support our family. The judge's expression got harder as I spoke. She took notes constantly. When did you first learn about Joanna staying in your home? When my daughter told me the morning I was braiding her hair for picture day. Chloe said Joanna already picked which room would be hers at Joanna's house. That Joanna measured her room to know what furniture to buy. I described coming home, finding the clothes, the toothbrush, the systematic infiltration of my home while I worked night shifts to pay our mortgage. Grace showed the surveillance footage Kieran had captured. Joanna arriving after I left for work. Staying until just before I came home. Letting herself in with her own key. The judge watched without expression, but her jaw was tight. Richard took the stand after lunch. His attorney tried to make the stories sound innocent. Creative writing, harmless fiction, just helping a friend with a project. The judge let him talk for maybe 5 minutes before she interrupted. "Mr. Richard, did you plan to divorce your wife and move Joanna Dunlap into her role as your daughter's primary caregiver?" Richard's attorney objected. The judge overruled. "Answer the question, Mr. Richard." Richard opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his attorney, looked back at the judge. The silence stretched out. That silence said everything. The judge made another note. "Let me rephrase. Did you participate in writing stories with Miss Dunlap that depicted your daughter's mother leaving permanently?" "Yes, but they were just stories." "Did you allow Miss Dunlap to move her belongings into the marital home while your wife worked to support the family?" "She needed somewhere to store things temporarily." "Did you hide income and accounts your wife didn't know about while planning to end your marriage?" "I was protecting my business assets." The judge held up her hand. "That's enough." She looked at the courtroom. "I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. The notebooks, the financial records, the surveillance footage, the custody evaluator's report. This is one of the most calculated attempts at parental replacement I've seen in my years on the bench." She looked directly at Richard. "You spent months systematically preparing your daughter to accept her mother's removal from her life. You allowed your affair partner to infiltrate the family home. You hid financial resources while your wife worked to support the household. Your behavior shows profound disregard for your daughter's emotional well-being and disturbing willingness to manipulate a child's understanding of reality." The judge's ruling came immediately. No recess for deliberation. Primary physical custody is awarded to Lisa. Richard will have supervised visitation every other weekend. 2 hours per visit, with a court-appointed supervisor present. Child support will be calculated based on Richard's full income, including the previously hidden accounts. Richard is ordered to attend co-parenting classes focused on respecting the child's relationship with both parents. She paused and looked at Richard again. Any further attempts to interfere with the mother's relationship with the child will result in termination of parental rights. This court takes parental alienation seriously, and your behavior constitutes a clear attempt to alienate this child from her mother. Richard's face went white. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but Richard shook it off. "Grace and I left the courthouse together. You did it. Full custody, child support, supervised visitation, everything you wanted. I felt lighter than I had in months. Chloe was safe. Richard couldn't take her. The house was mine." The divorce proceedings moved faster after the custody ruling. Grace negotiated from a position of strength. "I keep the house since my income pays the mortgage and Chloe needs stability. Richard has to buy out my share of his consulting business. The hidden accounts get split 50-50. Richard's attorney barely fought any of it. His client had no leverage left. The judge had made it clear what she thought of Richard's behavior. Fighting would only make things worse. We finalized everything in 6 weeks. The house deed transferred to my name alone. Richard's business buyout payment hit my account. The hidden money he'd been stashing for his new life with Joanna got divided. Grace called when the final papers were signed. "You're officially divorced, and you got everything. The house, primary custody, child support, full financial settlement." I hung up and looked around my living room, legally mine. No more Richard, no more Joanna, just me and Chloe building our life. Joanna's sentencing hearing happened a week later. Grace went with me even though I wasn't testifying. The prosecutor had enough evidence without my testimony. 2 restraining order violations, 1 arrest at my home, 1 arrest at Chloe's school. The prosecutor laid out a pattern of obsessive behavior, attempts to insert herself into a child's life, refusal to respect court orders. The judge looked through the file. "Miss Dunlap, you've been arrested twice in 1 month for violating a restraining order. You attempted to remove a child from the school without authorization. You entered a home you were explicitly ordered to stay away from. Your behavior demonstrates an obsession that warrants serious consequences. 6 months in county jail. No early release. No contact with the family after release." Joanna started crying. Her attorney tried to argue. The judge wasn't interested. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your actions and the need to protect this family from further harassment. Joanna got led away in handcuffs. Grace and I walked out into the sunshine. 6 months. She'll be gone while you and Chloe rebuild. I felt relief wash over me. No more looking over my shoulder. No more worrying about Joanna showing up. 6 months of peace to help Chloe heal. I found a therapist for Chloe the week after Joanna's sentencing. Dr. Miller specialized in helping kids recover from parental alienation. Her office had toys and books scattered around, making it feel safe instead of clinical. I sat in the waiting room during that first session, flipping through magazines without reading them. When Dr. Miller brought Chloe out 45 minutes later, my daughter looked lighter somehow. Over the next weeks, I watched Chloe slowly unpack everything Richard and Joanna had planted in her mind. Dr. Miller used play therapy, letting Chloe act out scenarios with dolls. One afternoon when I picked her up, Dr. Miller pulled me aside to say Chloe had spent the session making the mommy doll stay with the daughter doll instead of leaving. Progress came in small moments. Chloe stopped flinching when I mentioned working at the hospital. She stopped asking if I was tired, stopped watching me like she expected me to disappear. 3 weeks into therapy, she crawled into my lap at bedtime and asked if I was really staying forever. I held her close and promised that nothing would ever make me leave her. She fell asleep in my arms that night, something she hadn't done in months. Richard's first supervised visit happened at a community center 2 weeks after the custody ruling. His mother agreed to supervise, arriving early to set ground rules with him before Chloe came in. I watched through the observation window as Richard tried to explain to Chloe why he couldn't see her alone anymore. He stumbled over his words, reaching for her hand while she sat stiff in her chair. His mother redirected him when he started complaining about the custody arrangement. She made him focus on Chloe, asking our daughter about school and her friends. After the visit, Richard's mother walked me to my car and told me privately that she made sure he focused on Chloe, instead of trying to justify what he did. She apologized again for not seeing the signs earlier. The visits continued every other weekend. Awkward, but incident-free. Richard's mother sent me updates after each one, documenting how he interacted with Chloe and whether he stayed appropriate. Grace called me 4 months after I'd first walked into her office with photos of Joanna's clothes in my closet. The divorce was finalized. I legally retained sole ownership of our home while Richard moved into a small apartment across town. Grace told me it was one of the fastest divorces she'd handled. Richard's attorney had advised him not to fight because the evidence against him was overwhelming. The house deed arrived in the mail 3 days later, my name alone on the title. I hung it in my home office, a reminder that I'd fought for this and won. Richard's buyout payment for his share of the consulting business hit my account the same week. The hidden money he'd been stashing got split down the middle. I put half in Chloe's college fund and used the rest to refinish the hardwood floors he'd always refused to fix. I met with Nora in her office at the hospital to discuss my schedule. I needed to reduce my night shifts to just 2 per week, picking up day shifts instead. I wanted to be home more in the evenings as Chloe adjusted to our new reality. Nora listened without interrupting, then pulled up the schedule on her computer and started moving shifts around. She told me she was proud of how I fought for my daughter while maintaining my professional responsibilities. She'd watched me handle the worst crisis of my life without letting it affect my patient care. The new schedule started the following week. I worked Tuesday and Friday nights, with day shifts filling out the rest. Coming home before dinner felt strange at first, but Chloe's face when I walked through the door made every adjustment worth it. Dr. Miller gave me updates after each of Chloe's therapy sessions. Real progress showed in how my daughter talked about our future. She stopped asking about Joanna, stopped mentioning the stories about the princess whose mother leaves. Instead, she talked about what we'd do together, plans that stretched months and years ahead. Dr. Miller told me during one of our parent consultations that children are resilient when they have one stable, loving parent. Chloe clearly had that in me. The notebook full of stories stayed locked in my safe, evidence I hoped never to need again, but refused to destroy. Chloe drew her own stories now, pictures of the two of us doing ordinary things like grocery shopping and watching movies. No princesses whose mothers disappeared, no beautiful neighbors taking over, just us, together and staying that way. Casey dissolved his partnership with Richard 6 weeks after the custody hearing. He called me to explain, saying he couldn't be associated with someone who tried to replace his wife like an employee. The business they'd built together split down the middle, leaving Richard scrambling to maintain clients on his own. I felt grim satisfaction knowing that Richard's plan to have Joanna support him while he pushed me out had collapsed. He was alone now, struggling financially in his small apartment, paying child support from a business that barely survived without Casey's connections. His consulting income dropped by half according to the financial disclosures his attorney had to provide. The man who'd dismissed my nursing salary as making me absent now depended on that same salary through child support to keep himself housed. 6 months after finding Joanna's clothes in my closet, I sat in my living room watching Chloe play with toys scattered across the floor. My living room, legally and fully mine. The room Joanna had once measured, planning which furniture to replace, My daughter was happy, secure, building elaborate scenarios with her dolls where families stayed together. She knew without doubt that her mother would always be here. The guest room closet still held some of my dresses that Joanna had moved, but I'd slowly been bringing them back to the main bedroom, reclaiming space that had been mine all along. The left side of my closet filled with my clothes again, tags removed, worn, and lived in. No more blouses waiting for someone else to claim my life. Richard's supervised visitation continued without incident through the fall and into winter. His relationship with Chloe slowly rebuilt around the reality that I was her primary parent, and always would be. He stopped trying to explain himself during visits, focusing instead on being present for the 2 hours every other weekend. He started being civil in our necessary communications about Chloe's schedule and school events. Perhaps he finally understood that his plan didn't just fail, it cost him everything he actually had. His mother told me he'd started therapy himself, working through whatever had made him think replacing his wife was a reasonable solution to marital problems. I didn't care about his healing process. I cared that he showed up for Chloe on time and treated our daughter with the attention she deserved. Tina called me in early spring with news about Joanna. She'd been released from jail and immediately moved to another state. Tina had been tracking her because Joanna's ex-husband got a restraining order to keep her away from their children. The pattern I'd disrupted by fighting back had been exposed. Court records from Joanna's divorce showed she'd tried the same replacement scheme with her ex-husband's girlfriend, writing stories about the children's mother leaving. Other families were now protected from her obsessive schemes because I'd documented everything and pressed charges. Tina thanked me for being brave enough to fight back when her own family hadn't known how. I hung up feeling lighter, knowing Joanna was gone and legally barred from coming near us ever again. Nora called me into her office 8 months after I'd first asked to adjust my schedule. The promotion committee wanted to offer me a charge nurse position with better pay and more day shifts. Nora told me the committee was impressed by my grace under pressure during my personal crisis. They'd reviewed my performance records and found I'd maintained excellent patient care scores even while dealing with divorce and custody proceedings. My professional competence that Richard had dismissed as absence was now recognized and rewarded. The promotion came with a significant raise and a schedule that had me home every evening by 6. I accepted immediately, thinking about how I'd use the extra money to take Chloe on a real vacation, somewhere she'd never been, making new memories that had nothing to do with Richard or Joanna or notebooks full of lies. The parent conference happened 2 weeks later on a Tuesday afternoon. I sat across from Mrs. Henderson at one of those tiny desks meant for kids, my knees bumping the underside while she pulled out a folder with Chloe's name on it. She smiled before she even opened it. "Your daughter is doing wonderfully this year. She's engaged, participates in class discussions, and her reading comprehension has improved significantly." I felt myself relax slightly, grateful for good news after so many months of fighting. Mrs. Henderson flipped through some papers. "But what I really wanted to tell you is how much Chloe talks about you." She beamed. "Every time we have sharing time, she mentions that her mom is a nurse who helps people. Last week during our community helpers unit, she brought in a picture of you in your scrubs and told the whole class about how you take care of sick patients at night." I felt my throat tighten. "She talks about me? All the time." Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. "She's clearly so proud of you. When we read stories about families, she always wants to share something about what you do together. Baking cookies, reading before bed, your weekend trips to the park. She feels very secure and loved." I thought about Richard's words during our confrontation. His claims that Chloe barely saw me, that my work schedule was damaging her, that she needed a more present mother figure. All of it had been lies designed to justify what he wanted to do. Mrs. Henderson closed the folder. "I've been teaching for 15 years and I can tell when a child feels neglected or insecure. Chloe is neither of those things. Whatever you're doing, it's working." I thanked her and left the school with something loosening in my chest. Richard's guilt had made him project his own failures onto me, twisting reality to excuse his betrayal. Richard's mother started coming by every Saturday morning 3 weeks after that conference. She'd knock on the door at 10, always bringing something for Chloe. Books, art supplies, her homemade cookies that my daughter loved. "I'm so sorry I didn't see what he was planning." She said it the first time and kept saying it every visit. I should have known something was wrong. I told her she couldn't have known, that Richard had hidden it well. But she shook her head. "I raised him better than that. What he did to you, trying to replace you like you were nothing." She took Chloe to the Children's Museum one Saturday, then to the aquarium the next. My daughter came home happy and tired, telling me about the sharks they saw and the paintings they made together. Richard's mother always returned her right on time and stayed for a few minutes at the door. "You're a wonderful mother," she'd say it while Chloe ran inside to put away her things. "I'm grateful you fought to keep her from being manipulated." She told me about calling Richard after the custody hearing, telling him he'd shamed the family and broken something that might never be fixed. "He's my son and I love him, but what he did was unforgivable." She became a regular part of our lives, the grandmother Chloe needed, apologizing with actions instead of just words. 1 year after I found the notebook in Chloe's desk, I sat in my living room on a Saturday evening watching my daughter build a fort out of couch cushions. The house was quiet except for her humming while she worked. My promotion had been official for 4 months now, the pay increase making everything easier. I'd paid down the credit card debt from the divorce attorney fees and started saving for the vacation I'd promised Chloe. We were going to the beach in summer, just the two of us, making memories in a place Richard and his plans had never touched. The house was mine, legally and completely. Every mortgage payment I made erased another piece of his presence. The bedroom closet held only my clothes now, the left side filled with the dresses Joanna had moved to make room for herself. I'd thrown out her toothbrush and makeup months ago, scrubbed away every trace of her attempted takeover. Chloe thrived here in ways I'd worried might be impossible after everything she'd been exposed to. Her therapy sessions had dropped to once a month, her therapist saying she showed remarkable resilience. My daughter knew she was loved and safe, and that certainty had helped her heal faster than I'd hoped. I worked day shifts mostly now, home every evening by 6 to make dinner and help with homework. The work Richard had dismissed as absence had paid for this stability, this peace, this home where Chloe could build forts and hum without fear of someone trying to replace her mother. Chloe asked the question on a Wednesday night while I was making spaghetti. Why did Daddy try to bring Joanna into our family? She stood in the kitchen doorway holding her math homework, looking at me with those serious eyes that meant she'd been thinking about this for a while. I turned down the heat on the stove and sat at the table, patting the chair next to me. She climbed up and waited. Daddy made a mistake. I chose my words carefully, keeping them age-appropriate like her therapist had coached me. He hurt people because he wasn't thinking about how his choices would affect others. But he's learning to be better now. Is that why we don't live with him anymore? Chloe traced patterns on the table with her finger. Yes, sometimes when people make big mistakes, they need to live separately so everyone can heal and be safe. She nodded, accepting this with the straightforward logic of children who know they're loved. Do you still love him? No, sweet pea. But I don't hate him either. He's your daddy and he loves you, and that's what matters. She seemed satisfied with this and went back to her homework while I finished cooking. Later that night, I heard her talking to her stuffed animals during playtime, explaining to them that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but kids are still safe and loved. The resilience of children who have one stable parent never stopped amazing me. I started dating again in early spring, carefully and slowly like I'd promised myself. His name was Noah, a physical therapist I met at a hospital continuing education seminar. We went for coffee first, then dinner, then weekend hikes while Chloe stayed with Richard's mother. I told him about the divorce on our third date, the broad strokes without all the painful details. He listened without judgment and told me about his own divorce 3 years earlier. We took our time, both of us cautious after being hurt. Chloe didn't meet him until we'd been dating for 4 months, and even then it was just a quick introduction at a park. She said hi and went back to playing on the swings while Noah and I sat on a bench talking. Over the next few weeks, she saw him more, always in casual settings where there was no pressure. He never tried to act like a parent or push himself into our lives too fast. One Saturday, he brought supplies to help Chloe build a birdhouse, and I watched them work together in the backyard, my daughter laughing at his terrible jokes. Her ability to trust new people in our lives showed me we'd healed from Richard's betrayal. His attempt to replace me had only made our bond stronger, made Chloe more certain of who her real mother was and would always be. Richard completed his co-parenting classes in June, and his attorney filed a motion requesting unsupervised visitation. I called Brooke, Chloe's therapist, before responding. Is she ready? Brooke reviewed her notes from recent sessions. She's doing well, and she's expressed interest in spending more time with her father. I think supervised visits have served their purpose. She's secure enough now to handle unsupervised time. I agreed to the request, and the judge approved it at a brief hearing. Richard got Chloe every other weekend, Friday evening through Sunday afternoon. The first visit went smoothly according to Chloe, who came home talking about the movie they watched and the pancakes he made for breakfast. The second visit was equally uneventful. By the third month of unsupervised time, a new pattern had formed. Richard picked Chloe up on time, returned her on schedule, and focused on being her father instead of trying to explain or justify what he'd done. He'd finally accepted the reality that I was Chloe's mother, present and permanent, and nothing would change that. His supervised visits had taught him what mattered, and the consequences of his choices had reshaped how he showed up for our daughter. Grace texted me in late July suggesting lunch to celebrate. 1 year since you first called my office. Let me buy you a meal. We met at the Italian place downtown where we'd had our second meeting a year ago, back when everything felt overwhelming and impossible. She ordered wine and raised her glass. You're one of the strongest clients I've ever represented. I clinked my glass against hers. I couldn't have done it without you believing me. Grace shook her head. I believed you because you came in with evidence and a clear head despite being in crisis. Those notebooks, the photos, your documentation of everything. Most people in your situation are too shocked to think strategically. I took a sip of wine. I was terrified he'd actually succeed. That I'd lose Chloe to his plan. That's what made you fight so hard. Grace cut into her chicken. You understood that Richard's plan was real and dangerous. Not just a betrayal, but an active threat to your relationship with your daughter. A lot of people would have tried to smooth things over, or convince themselves it wasn't that serious. I thought about the measuring tape Joanna left in Chloe's room, the stories about the princess whose mother had to leave forever. Thank you for understanding how serious it was. Grace smiled. Thank you for trusting me to help you fight back. I tucked Chloe into bed that night in her room that still had the same furniture Joanna had measured to replace. My daughter was in her favorite pajamas, the ones with stars on them, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. Tell me a story, Mommy. She yawned and snuggled deeper under her blanket. I sat on the edge of her bed and made one up on the spot. Once upon a time, there was a princess who lived with her mother in a castle. They faced many challenges together, dragons and storms and difficult puzzles to solve. But no matter what happened, they stayed together. The princess knew her mother would always be there, and the mother knew her daughter was the most important thing in her life. They had adventures and quiet days, and sometimes things were hard, but they never separated. They stayed together through everything, and that's how they knew they'd be okay. Chloe's eyes were already closing. Do they live happily ever after? They live together ever after. I kissed her forehead, which is even better. She smiled in her sleep, and I stayed there for a few minutes watching her breathe. This story, unlike the others, was true. We'd stay together through everything because I'd fought for that truth and won.